We've got today's guest. As you all know, I always bring the best of the best. I bring incredible guests on, and this guest has also become friends with one of my best friends in the entire profession, Mr. Fraser Brooks. I saw you on with him, and you guys have fun. He always makes everybody have fun. Plus, you both have incredibly cool accents. At least us Americans think so. Way, way cooler than our boring gibberish accents that we've got over here. But I'm excited. You got a crazy story, man. And we're going to jump into the story in a second, and we'll give a little bit of perspective. You've done extremely well in the acting world. You've done extremely well in the motivational world. You know how to connect people with both the motivational side, but you understand that it's really getting into those emotions, because mindset will eat skills and systems for breakfast. And so that's where it all starts, is just right upstairs here, to be able to get people to learn, to be able to get people to take action and do what they know they need to do. But I actually want to start with an experience that you had that was the most dramatic experience you had in your life. I wrote a book called The Game of Conquering, and in that book, I actually went all in and talked about how I was in the car when my little brother died. We were in a car accident, and I'm not going to go into that right now. Those of you that read the book, I go deep into that. And that was an experience that it's almost like I suppressed it for a long time. I was the guy I was just always fine. And I was, but it's something that changed my life, and I didn't ever share. And it became the greatest experience that ever happened in my life, which is really scary to say out loud, because I hope, please, I don't ever have to have another challenging experience like that again. I know many of you that are listening and tuning in right now have had the death of loved ones, but I can't even imagine. Your dad committed suicide. I don't know the details. I know the gist of it. And I know that was a big struggle for you, but you turned that, as they say, that mess into your message. You turned that struggle into an incredible story. And so for me, this really hits home for me, because I was 16 years old. My little brother was 10 years old, and my whole family, except for my mom, were all in the car. And so I still think about it on a daily basis. And I'm sure it's no different for you. And so I'm excited to be motivated to learn. I'm excited for you to be on, and everyone wants to hear from you, not from me, as I always say on my interviews. So I want you to start with that, and we're just going straight into it, my man. I hope that's okay.
Absolutely, Rob. Absolutely. Like I always say, I'll talk about my dad all day long, mate. Like, I love talking about my dad. I want to keep my dad's spirit alive and name alive. And if my dad can be linked to any form of motivation that I can give to other people, any lives that I can change and create a ripple effect, I'll be proud of that, mate. So, of course, we can jump in. First and foremost, thanks for the invite, Rob. Appreciate that, of course. And in terms of the accents, mate, your accent is the accent I grew up with on television, watching a lot of American TV. So to me, it's not boring. It's almost nostalgic. So I love that. But yeah, man, like in terms of my dad, just to set the scene and paint the picture, like my dad was just the most vibrant, wonderful, funny, caring, humorous, incredible man. Like, he was the most incredible man I've ever met. This is a man who could break up a tense room with cracking a joke, and at the same time he could build a house with his bare hands and do the plumbing and the electric and the heating and all of that stuff that I could just never ever do. He was just my superhero, and he was so like me in many ways. Like, my dad loved life. He loved his family. He loved his home. He loved his dogs. He loved his car. He just loved cracking jokes. He loved so many different elements of life. And honestly, Rob, like, if someone had said to me, you can rank everybody you've ever met from least likely to most likely to take their own life, my dad would be right down here on the bottom, mate, of least likely. And I couldn't quite comprehend it or quite believe it for a very long time after it had actually happened. And the situation essentially was that I was at home. It was a really bright, sunny day. The birds were chirping. It was a crisp October day, one of those cold days, but the sun's out. Yeah. And it was October 29th, 2018. And I was on the phone to my mum, and spirits were high. Spirits were high. She runs a business, I run a business. Business was good. The family were well. Everyone seemed to be in a good place. People had their troubles. We had our struggles, but just general stuff, right? But in general, it was a good vibe. And then her doorbell went, and I assumed it was the postman or Amazon. She's always ordering things off Amazon. So she said, I'll be back in 5 minutes. And she put the phone down, and then I didn't hear from her for about 30 minutes. And it was strange, but I didn't really think too much of it. And then my phone rang, and it was my mum, and I answered the phone. And my mum was crying so much that I thought the phone was breaking up. And I was saying, Mum, I can't hear you. I can't hear you. Go into another room. The phone's breaking up. And then out of nowhere, there was this big booming female Scottish voice that came on the phone. And she said, Liam, my name is Police Officer X, Y, and Z. I have no memory of her name. And she said, what you need to do is you need to get your wife and you need to come to your mum's house. And I asked why. I said, well, why do I need to come to my mum's house? And she said, please get your wife and carefully drive to your mum's house. And I couldn't even begin to comprehend what they were talking about, right? So I said, please just tell me what it's about. And she said, well, your dad has stepped in front of a train and he's gone. He's dead. And honestly, Rob, there was no way in my conscious mind I was going to believe that. And I said, well, how do you know? How do you know my dad has stepped out in front of a train? And she said, well, put it this way. Someone stepped out in front of a train and your dad's car is in the car park and this person had his car keys and his wallet and his glasses. And I swear to God, it was more, it made more sense in my head that my dad had been mugged. The mugger had taken his keys, his wallet and his glasses, drove to a train station and stepped out in front of a train. Yeah. I could comprehend that more. And so I went completely numb, mate. I didn't really, all of my emotions, my feelings just disappeared in a second. I couldn't really feel anything. And my wife came home in about 5 minutes after, and she looked upset and she said, did you hear what happened? And I said, yeah, Dad's killed himself. And she just completely broke down. And because she thought my mum had got into trouble with the police because of some sort of driving, she went through a red light or something. And she was like, oh my God, the traffic police called me and they were at your mum's house. And I thought your mum was in trouble. And her and my dad, mate, are best friends, so close. And she just completely shattered. She broke down. And we got to my mum's house and I still didn't believe it. And it was only the next day where we could go to the hospital. And it's just, I love talking about it. It's a difficult story to talk about, but I love talking about my dad because I want to keep him alive in so many ways. And the hospital allowed us to see my dad's hand because that was what was left of my dad. He stepped out in front of a train going 100 miles an hour. And what was left was his hand. And his hands, mate, were just my dad had the most distinctive, wonderful dad hands, big, strong, manly hands. He was a plumber. He had all his nails were dented where he'd hit him with wrenches and hammers. And he always had cuts on his head. I'd recognize my dad's hands from a mile away. And it was in that exact moment, mate, that I knew that what had happened. And, it's a long story short for another time, but essentially he phoned his doctor. And because he wasn't sleeping, and he said to his doctor, I'm having trouble sleeping. And his doctor, a doctor who had never, ever met him before, he was a new doctor. So he never met him, never examined him. He prescribed him a combination of antidepressants and sleeping pills, a combination of pills he'd never had before because he was having trouble fucking sleeping. And then we came to find out that this particular combo, citalopram and zopiclone, essentially when given to someone who hasn't got depression, there is this unbelievable rate of suicide. You're very likely to kill yourself, essentially, if you take these pills and you don't suffer from depression. And he stepped out in front of a train. And I swear to God, mate, I have proven to myself that my coaching works since that day. Because I have needed to coach myself in so many different ways every single day since October 29th, 2018. What I think about, what I do, what my body posture does, what my internal dialogue does, my morning routine, everything. I need to be really careful with it because I'm keeping myself upright and I'm keeping myself alive and I'm keeping myself well, you know, in many respects, because it's a very difficult thing to process, but it's allowing me to realize that what I do is powerful because I'm surviving through it, but I'm also thriving through it. I'm using it and utilizing it to help people, to spread the message, to spread the coaching message far and wide, to get people to a place where they're feeling good and they're feeling strong and they can think clearly and they can move forward. Because when it comes to my dad passing away, I'll always say, I'll never move on because I don't want to move on.
Yeah.
But I will move forward, and I will move forward every single day, every day. And I can only do that through coaching. And it's proven to me that that works, mate. Very, very difficult.
Well, thank you for sharing. I know that's very personal, and I know that's something that it's always constantly thinking about. And I love what you just said there at the end of you're constantly coaching yourself. I think it's a common myth that people think they're always receiving coaching. They don't understand the point of receiving coaching is so that you can coach yourself. I played semi-professional tennis, and after that taught tennis, ran a tennis club, and now I just teach my kids tennis. And when I'm teaching my kids tennis, I'm always trying to teach them like, look, the way you're going to get really, really good is if I can teach you well enough that when I'm not there, you can actually coach yourself. So if you're playing a big tennis match and you miss 2 shots in a row, you can say to yourself, instead of just getting mad, what is that going to do? Instead, you can refocus and say, okay, I've got to do this a little better. I've got to do that a little better. And so I know sometimes the mind can be naturally negative. And so one of the things I've seen that's changed people's lives is I always say you've got to listen to yourself less and talk to yourself more. And if you have a negative thought that comes to your mind, you write down 3 solutions right away so that you can retrain your brain to work for you rather than against you. Definitely. And as you start to do that on a consistent basis, eventually you start to create this habit, right? Like you said, you just got to stay on top of it. You got to make it such a strong habit. And when something huge emotionally happens, like happened in your life, that's when you know, I've got to snap out of it quicker, because we're all going to have those down moments. The key is how can you have less of them and how can you snap out of them quicker? So you've got a top 10 podcast. Tell us a little bit more where people can find your podcast before we go on the next couple of questions, because I want to make sure I don't forget.
Yeah, nice one, Rob. Appreciate that. So yeah, me and my business partner, Lewis Raymond Taylor, we've got a podcast called The Coaching Masters Podcast, and the Coaching Masters is our organization. The podcast used to be called The Postman and the Prisoner, because before I became a coach, I was a postman, which is a mailman in the US. And my partner Lewis, he had a very checkered past, and he found himself in prison at one point, and he had quite a violent upbringing. And coaching completely turned his life around. And coaching completely turned my life around. It was called The Prisoner and the Postman, but we thought, you know what, let's just relate it directly to coaching. So that is the Coaching Masters podcast for anyone that wants to listen to that.
So tell us a little bit about maybe some of your craziest acting stories, because you've been involved with actors like Tom Hardy and other famous actors, and I'm sure that you've got some fun stories. So tell us a little bit about some of your crazy, or one of your craziest acting stories.
So I'll tell you the one that pops into my head straight away, right? I'll be apprehensive to name the film, because then people can put the pieces of the puzzle togetger, but maybe I will.
50 Shades of Grey. They already know. Go on.
Yeah, that was the most awkward audition of my life. No, I did this film with Benedict Cumberbatch, and me and Benedict Cumberbatch, we had this like wicked fight scene, right? We had this like awesome fight scene, and the director of the movie was this sort of like big, burly, strong guy. And he was a personal trainer for some of the stars in Hollywood. And this is how he met Benedict, right? He used to be his trainer. And he said, look, Benedict, I've written this film and I want you to star in it. And he agreed, right? And I knew the director really well. And I was only in my second year of drama school. And he phoned me and he was like, Liam, do you want to be in a film with Benedict Cumberbatch? I was like, yeah, absolutely, mate. And so the next day I'm on set and we've got this big fight scene. And at the end of the fight scene, this one character is supposed to punch Benedict's character in the face, and that ends the fight. So the director, I don't know what he was thinking, right? To this day, I don't know what he's thinking. But he was like, I'm going to play that part, right? I'm going to be the guy that steps in at the end and punches Benedict's character in the face. So this whole fight scene goes like swimmingly, right? It's the perfect fight scene, everything's seamless. And then right at the last minute, the director literally punches Benedict Cumberbatch square in the nose, and his nose just goes and just starts bleeding, right? And Benedict is genuinely saying, like, my God, I'm filming Sherlock like in a week. Like if my nose is busted, mate, everybody's in trouble because I've got to be on set. I've got to be filming. He was like, it's so funny because he's such a gentleman, but at the same time, he was so angry. So it was almost like a very angry, polite Benedict. Like, he was trying to be polite, but at the same time, he was trying to be really angry.
We call that passive aggressive.
True. And he went into his trailer and he was just like, slammed the door shut. But you know what, mate? 5 minutes later, came out, almost like nothing had happened, and he finished the whole scene. And he just finished the day. He didn't mention it again. There was no bad blood. But mate, everyone on set was like so tense because Benedict Cumberbatch had just been punched square in the face by the director. And none of us knew where to look, mate. Like no one was making eye contact with anyone. We were like so scared. It wasn't funny at the time, but now I look back on it, it is funny.
You're like, this is extremely awkward. So I would assume with acting, there are lots of different skills that you learned as well that helped for whether it be public speaking or communication. Of course, there's grit and there's determination. That I've got some friends that are actors, and wow, that's brutal. I mean, that's just tough. So give us some insights and tips how you've parlayed things from the acting world that have helped you in everything else.
You know what, Rob? It's so interesting. No one's ever asked me that before, but it's so accurate, right? It's so accurate. When I was in drama school, I was doing a lot of reading around this one acting practitioner called Stanislavski, right? Konstantin Stanislavski. He's like the godfather of modern acting. He's from Russia back in like the 1920s. And when I was reading a lot of coaching books at the time as well. So I knew a lot about coaching. I knew a lot about NLP, public speaking, because I was starting to get an interest. And I was reading all of these acting books and I was like, that's coaching. Like all he's talking about is coaching. He's talking about changing your internal dialogue. Like he's talking about conjuring up images in your imagination in order to feel a certain way. He's talking about changing your body posture in order to change the way that you feel. And I was like, this is coaching. So like, mate, to answer your question, I've taken an unbelievable amount from the acting world, right? Even in that instance, whether it's the power of internal dialogue, internal images, body posture, different levels of tension in speech as well, words to use that capture people's imaginations, and a rate in which you use your tonality and the speed in which you talk to grab people's attention. I took a lot of it from the stage, to be honest. And now I take it off the acting stage and I put it on the public speaking stage, and it just seems to work swimmingly.
I can only imagine, because I know for me, it was not my nature at all. I mean, I played tennis, but when I started doing public speaking, it was so different. I had to start really paying attention and buying every single book I could and start watching, right? Just what you said. When do they have pauses in their voice? And when are they accentuating specific points, right? Raising the tone. And then what's their speed like? And then I was never smiling. I was just like really serious, right? It was just, I felt so uncomfortable. I'm sure everybody else that was watching felt even more uncomfortable as I did it. But I kept doing it and doing it and doing it over and over and over and got better and better. And I kept focusing. And I think one of the common myths is people always cite the 10,000 hour rule to become great at anything. Well, the big word in there is deliberate practice. You've seen a lot of people that have acted probably for 20 years and they're still not that good. I've seen people that have played tennis for 20 years and they practice and they've put in probably 30,000 hours, but it's not deliberate practice. That's why it's so important that you get yourself a coach, that you take these things and the biggest part about learning is apply. It's learn, apply, apply, apply. It's not learn, little apply as you go. It's making sure, right, that you're taking action on different things. So let's talk a little bit about some of the things that you teach in your program. What are some of the top tips. I know some people like, it's like 9-step formula, 3 steps, 7 steps, 2 steps. I don't really care. We can go with a couple right now, 1 or 2, but I would love to hear some of your top tips for mindset. Because mindset for me, that was my strength when I played tennis, because now I'm tall. I'm 6'1". It's all relative to what tall is, but I grew up as the little guy. I was like the shortest, littlest guy. And so I used my wits, I used my speed, and I was just extremely mentally tough. So when I grew, it was incredible, but I was always, so in some ways, I always still see myself as the underdog and the little guy. And so I'm really, really big on mindset. So for me, I love these interviews because I'm always learning as well. So I'm excited to listen and hear some of your top tips for mindset.
Definitely, mate. Definitely. Have you ever come across something before called the neurological levels of change? Have you heard of this before?
I haven't. No.
You'll love this, Rob, right? This is one of the modules that we teach on our 12-week accreditation course for those people that want to become coaches. And it's a model that's like very easy to visualize. And when you wrap your head around it, you start to apply it to near enough anything. So essentially what the model's about, it's all about how to create change in your life that's actually going to last. Because we've all had that experience where we've said, right, New Year's resolution, right? I'm going to make a change. And then that change lasts for maybe a day or a couple of days. And then you start beating yourself up and you're questioning yourself and you're thinking, well, maybe I'm not good enough to make the change. Maybe it's not for me. Maybe I should just carry on doing what I'm doing. And you start to get defeatist, right? But the reason for that is based on this model. So if we imagine a pyramid, right? I want everybody listening to this to imagine a pyramid. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to work up the pyramid, right? So the lowest levels of the pyramid are the weakest, and the top levels of the pyramid are the strongest. Now, the bottom level of the pyramid is your environment, right? It's just the environment in which you are in. Now, when people try to make a change, they tend to try to make that change on the level of environment. So I'll give you an example, right? Somebody wants to get in shape. They'll change their environment. They'll move their environment from the sofa to the gym. That in itself is not enough to get in shape, right? If we just use this gym analogy as one example, it's just not enough to get in shape. Yet, when people want to make a change, they tend to change their environment first and think that miraculously their life will change forever if they just slightly change their environment. One level up from your environment is your behavior. So this is what you actually do within that new environment. So for instance, using this analogy, I might change my environment from the sofa to the gym. And then when I'm in the gym, I might change my behavior. And my behavior might be that I'm actually doing some exercises, right? But still, is that going to create long-lasting positive change that you will never, ever go back on? Probably not. Probably won't be strong enough. So then we take it to the third level of the pyramid, which are your capabilities or your skills. Now, when somebody wants to make a change, they can start to develop certain skills, right? That's a lot stronger than simply changing your behavior and changing your environment, because you're actively trying to learn some new skills. So that's okay, right? And maybe some change will occur if you change your environment, you change your behavior, and you change your skill set, right? So maybe now I'm in the gym and not only I'm exercising, but I'm learning some pretty, some difficult techniques. But still, it's not deep. The fourth level is where we start to get to the deep work. The fourth level are your values and your beliefs. Now, if somebody makes a change on the level of their values and their beliefs, right? Your values are what you find important, and your beliefs are what you believe in, essentially, what you think is true. If you create a real change on that level, that is when you're slowly starting to creep into the realm of long-lasting positive change that can last a very long time. But one level higher than that even, right, which some would consider the strongest level, is the level of identity. Now, that is, who am I? That is an identity statement like no other. This is who I am, right? This is just a part of me. So then all of a sudden, if we're using this gym analogy, if person number one is trying to get in shape and all they've done is change their behavior, right? And their environment. They've gone to the gym and they've done some exercises. That's not going to be as strong as the person who makes a change on the level of identity. And they say, getting fit is just who I am. That is me. It's a part of me. If we want to create a change in our life, we must make a change on the level of who we are and how we see ourselves as an individual. So for everybody listening to this, if there's a change that you want to make in your life that maybe you've been struggling with for a long time, try to figure out why and where that change is not coinciding with your values, your beliefs, and your identity. Because if you can start to link who you are as an individual to this change that you want to make, then you will make the change because it just becomes a part of your identity. And that model, mate, I just love it. Every time I want to make a change or do something, I'm thinking, what do I need to do to apply this to my identity? Who I am, my values, my beliefs. Because I know if I make that change, then the change will be long lasting.
Yeah, it's two of the most powerful words, I am. And too many people follow that with negative connotations. I mean, I know specifically in the network marketing industry, I hear all the time, I am bad at recruiting. I'm just naturally not good at this and this and this. And even to the point of things I've changed, like I tell people, yeah, I'm naturally an introvert, but actually I'm whoever I want to be.
Yes.
Whenever I want to be it. Because I mean, doing podcasts like this, I mean, that's not typical introvert style. So I'm not anything. I'm what I want to be. And for me, it's creating that identity, like you said. For me, I haven't missed working out at least once, right? Every single week, which typically when I'm in town is 5 days a week in 13 years, because it's not even an option. It's who I am, right? And that's the key, like you're saying there. And so that's not, and I just think it's so important that all of you that are tuning in, like if you say something about recruiting, it's not that you need to lie to yourself, but you need to start to project who you want to become. So you can say, I'm becoming better at recruiting. I'm learning what not to do, but never say I am followed with anything that has a negative connotation of just saying this is who you are, because we know that's never permanent. We know, I mean, think about something you've probably done previously that you were bad at and now you're great at. So if that's the case with something else, it can be the case with anything and everything. So last question, what's maybe a way that somebody can start to help create that identity shift and really start to challenge that identity shift? Because, I mean, there's people that deal with it with weight. Tons of people deal with it with weight. That's an easy one. And it becomes their identity of they just think that's who they are. It becomes that way with different emotions. It becomes that way, right, with different relationships. It's with everything, right?
Definitely, mate. Definitely. And the thing is, that stuff runs deep as well. A lot of times people think that they are the only ones that are experiencing those limiting beliefs of not being enough, not being loved enough, not being good enough, but then you voice it and you realize that so many people are faced with that sort of thing. And those are the barriers that are holding us back. So we need to tackle that somehow, right? And to answer your question, Rob, how can that person who's listening to this apply this? How can they find themselves on that level of identity? The way we do it is with the secret sixth level. The sixth level, the level that actually is the most powerful level of this pyramid, the tip of the pyramid, is the only level that's actually outside of the individual. And that level is vision, your reason, your why, your motivation. You have to get in touch in a deep, deep way with the reason why you want to do something, especially if what it is you want to do is very difficult. Quitting smoking is very difficult. Losing weight is very difficult. Finding a great relationship, very difficult. All of these things that we desire and we hope for, they're difficult. And we lose our interest around the reason why we're doing it, because otherwise we think it's a good thing to do because we've been told it's a good thing to do, or maybe we know it is something that we want, but we don't quite know why. We need to tap into the why. Tap into the why. And the best way of doing that is to sit with yourself. Be with yourself, sit with yourself, listen to yourself, talk to yourself. It doesn't make you crazy. It makes you a human being. You know, we are social creatures, and we understand the power of having this people being able to say that we've done a good job, right? People being able to give us that validation. Of course, it's important, but we need it from ourselves as well. Take the time to sit and talk to yourself, be with yourself, think by yourself, and start to tap into the reasons as to why you want to do something. And I'll give you a little tip. The chances are it's because you've lacked something previously, because voids create values. If you once had a void, it has driven you to a desire. I want this because I once didn't have it. If you can tap into that and understand what that void was, then you can find your interest and your motivation and your why for wanting to do something. And then that will slowly trickle down the pyramid, starting with, you know what? This is just who I am. This is what I want because this is who I am. And this is what I value. And this is what I believe. And therefore, you're going to change your skill set, your behaviors, and your environment as a byproduct of all of that other work you've done at the top of the pyramid.
It's fixing that foundation. I absolutely love it. I know that it's key, it's critical, and that's really, really deep. I mean, that's really deep. And hopefully for many of you that you're tuning in, you can take some of this stuff and say, as I always say, find at least one thing that you're going to create as your executable, that you're going to say, you know what, right? Because it's learn and then it's apply. It's not just learn, oh, that was good, on to the next one. I'm going to listen to the next great content out there. It's actually applying it so it can make a difference in your life. Well, I appreciate you for being so real and vulnerable and sharing some of your experiences and giving so much value. Much, much appreciated. I know we're going to have to do this again, and we'll go to the next layers, because we started here and you can already see how deep it's just starting. And I know you could go on for not hours, days and weeks about all this good stuff, but it's such an important topic. So Liam, thank you, my man, for making time. I know everybody else appreciates it, and we're going to have to do this again.
Appreciate you, Rob. Thank you very much for having me on the show.